Greg, let's start with the China situation. How bad is it right now? The government, the Finance Minister, Matthias Cormann, trying to say, look, this is a technical issue, we'll get beyond it, but how do you read it?
Kieran, I think this is quite a serious situation for Australia. Beijing undoubtedly has the ability to impose significant trade costs on Australia if it chooses to do so. I think all the government ministers saying this is unrelated to the calls for a COVID-19 inquiry are kind of telling fibs, but they are necessary and proper fibs for a government to tell. We commentators can be a bit more realistic. For the Chinese state, which is a socialist state, where there is no such thing as free trade, to accuse the Australian agricultural sector, which is world renowned as one of the least subsidised sectors in the world, of dumping, is inherently ludicrous. But Beijing is very aggressive at the moment and is deciding to punish nations that disagree with it. Now, I think the Morrison government needs to hold its nerve, and it looks as though it's doing so. At the same time, it doesn't want to inflame things unnecessarily. So it's right to take the Chinese at their word and say these are technical industry measures. But, those of us who don't have the disciplines of government can tell the unvarnished truth, which is this is brutal Chinese trade aggression against Australia with no justification at all, conducted purely for political purposes.
And the one thing you've said there I want to explore, and you referenced its impact and retaliation on nations, plural. This is not something that we're alone in, is it? It's happening in terms of retribution with various nations, and it's not just in terms of coronavirus, but the treatment of Taiwan and other matters where they don't like it, they will react and react forcefully.
That's right. Now, that's exactly right, and this Chinese aggressiveness is evident all over the world. You see military aggression in the South China Sea and in the East China Sea. Chinese naval boats were chasing a Japanese commercial boat yesterday or the day before. You're also seeing extreme diplomatic aggression in Europe. The Chinese embassy website in France bizarrely accusing the French government of leaving infected old people to die untreated in their old people's homes and so on. This is a very paranoid, aggressive moment that China is passing through. It's normally a long time before Beijing gets to a trade sanction. It has done trade sanctions against other nations, Britain in the past, Japan, South Korea. It hasn't done much of that sort of thing to Australia. It has done a little bit, but it looks as though it's going to wipe out our barley exports. It's imposed at least temporary penalties on our beef exports. Now, it's hoping to set up a hue and cry in Australia amongst the affected parties for the Australian government to just surrender and let the Chinese do whatever they like. But that would be absolutely disastrous for Australia. The truth is the Morrison government has not done anything unreasonable to provoke this. Calling for an inquiry into the COVID-19 epidemic is common sense. It's a position shared by the Europeans. And now, indeed, Beijing itself has said that it accepts in principle that there should be an inquiry when things have settled down. So there's no formal difference between Beijing and Canberra's position on this. But Beijing is also very unhappy with us for banning Huawei from 5G, because of our foreign interference laws. They just don't like Australia looking after its national interests. So now they're asking the question, we're going to hit you and hurt you and impose a penalty on you when you're vulnerable after COVID-19. Are you going to buckle? Now, I think the Australian government response has to be, no, we're not going to buckle, but at the same time, we're not going to exaggerate the rhetoric. So if there is unreasonable rhetoric, let it come from Beijing's side.